welcome back to Late Night in the Midlands. Stan Deyo, welcome back, my friend.
Good to be here, Michael. How's things in your part of the world?
Well, so far so good. It's hot one day and cold the next, but I think a lot of the country is experiencing that, huh?
Hey, and sinkholes and flooding and earthquakes and volcanoes elsewhere, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you see that one about the golfer that the sinkhole opened underneath him, swallowed him up?
Yes, and how about
we got that on the
Florida?
website. Yeah, I was telling Holly she put it up, and I had to look at that, and I thought, gee whiz, that's kind of neat. We could say, instead of making a hole in one, it was one in a hole.
Oh, that's bad. It's funny, but it's bad. I mean, could you imagine?
I know.
You're standing there getting ready to, hit the ball down the grass, and all of a sudden the earth opens up. And there's a lot of this going on now.
Oh, I know. All over the place.
So,
China as well as here.
Yeah, absolutely. In Louisiana, it's a big sinkhole there, too. So what's going on, Stan? I mean, you seem to have a pretty good handle on a lot of this stuff, and with the increase in earthquakes and so on. I guess we could start there if you want, with the earthquakes. You do pretty good at, I don't want to call it predicting, but, predicting where the next big ones might show up. How do you do it?
Well, I developed a technique that I guess it was 1995 when I started playing with some data from the U.S. Navy. And at the time, the Navy at California at Monterey were putting up twice a day maps of the oceans of the world with the data they were collecting from their submarines and from buoys and ships and from some satellites. Now, the data they put up was showing the sea surface temperature all over the planet. It also showed the deviation from the normal of the sea surface temperatures all over the planet. Now, if you look at, temperatures of the sea, normally there's this big red swath of hotter at the equator and cooler toward the polar regions, big deal. But I looked at what's called their anomaly map, the difference in today's sea surface temperature as compared to, say, an average of 30 days or a year before. They use different averages, but still, it shows you how unusual the ocean temperature is in certain places, everywhere actually, according to the average temperature. Well, it made pretty pictures. It had little, globs of color here and globs of color there, and and blues and reds. And I thought, well, this is interesting. And I was playing around with it one day, and I had a couple of days maps of this sea surface temperature in front of me, and I was using Photoshop, and I put the two images together, and I subtracted them, I added them, I multiplied them, and see if it made neat patterns, just killing time. And well, gosh, that was interesting. I thought I looked at around the California coastline there, and in the images that I was playing with the day before, I'd seen some kind of on their maps it was yellow and green, a yellow and green thing like a butterfly right on the coast of the United States there, where an earthquake had happened the day I was looking at it. I thought, well, I wonder. I mean, I don't know why, but maybe there's a change in sea surface temperature or something, and that'll be a precursor for earthquakes. Well, I started developing the technique, and it took me a while to work out the kinks in it, but I also found out that the Navy not only was taking data from temperature changes, but they were accidentally or otherwise putting in electrical field data from their satellites showing changes in electricity in the atmosphere above fault lines. Not that they intended to do it, I think it was just a byproduct of the way they did the maps. Well, okay, so I figured out that, make it a long story a little bit shorter, that the change in temperature on one side of a fault line versus the one on the other side of the fault line, the temperatures on either side of the fault line, when those became at opposites, like one got colder, one got hotter on that map, that it formed kind of like a little rough butterfly wing, left wing being yellow, right wing being green, and it was, one temperature and charge going up and the other one going down. And electricity was taking the heat from one side of the fault line up into the air just above the sea surface and going into the other side of the fault line and delivering heat to that side. So one side was getting cold, the other side was getting warm. This is something that happens in electrical theory, Thomson effect and Peltier effect. The electricity actually sucks heat out of one side of the conductor and puts it over to the other one, especially in dissimilar joints. Now, around the coastal areas, the coastlines of all the continents, there are huge formations of crystallized rock from ages ago. And when you fracture some of these with the pressure, you start to press on them to break them apart. It's like taking one of those wintergreen lifesavers in the dark and hit it with a hammer. You see flashes of light from the electricity produced by breaking the crystals in the wintergreen lifesaver. This is the same thing that happens, called piezoelectricity. and piezoelectricity. And when these fault lines get under pressure and about to erupt, it might take 1 to 10 days sometimes before the eruption or the earthquake finally takes place. And, of course, the bigger it is, I found out, the earlier we get a signal, because it starts to build like that over 2 or 3 days, and I say, well, something's going to happen there. And that's basically the concept I used up until 2006 when the Navy stopped supplying the maps, well, at least to the public. They got new satellites and new programs and discontinued it. Now, I did visit the Navy with Holly at Monterey early in the game, and they told me I would have about a 30% error in my calculations because they had about a 30% error in theirs from cloud cover and faulty buoys and submarine data that was missed and that kind of stuff. Therefore, they said, we can't endorse you publicly because of this because of this error in the heat maps, but we will look at your site every day. Interesting theory. Now, when they stopped producing the maps that I was using, about a year or so later, I was reading a technical paper and found out that the U.S. Navy, among other scientific groups, had suddenly decided to start looking at the electrical methods of forecasting earthquakes by studying the electric components over the fault line, exactly what I've been doing for, 10 or 11 years before that. It was flattering in that respect, and I guess about a year before I lost their data, I was contacted by the entire Admiralty in a phone call, a conference phone call, the entire Admiralty of Mexico, and they wanted to know how to do these maps because they wanted to be able to predict, tsunamis and earthquakes along the western Mexican coast, which I explained to them and told them where to get the information from the Navy and whatever, and also had a phone call from the Association of the 50 island nation states around the world because they really have to worry about tsunamis and sea level rise and things like that. And these people were all using the service, and then, of course, we lost the data. And it wasn't until this year that I figured out how to get data from other types of data streams that weren't, classified or weren't Navy and that kind of stuff, put them together. It takes a little bit longer, about 3 times as long, but I put them together and was able to then forecast earthquakes. This time, the data is so accurate, I was absolutely stunned. I hit 90% of the earthquakes that do occur with this,
amazing.
And that's how I do it.
That's amazing. Now, what about inland? Is there a way to do this inland, or does this only work on the coast?
I can't do it. I need a big computer to do that, and access to the infrared high detail. And these are classified, but over land masses, the heat signature of the land. You have to have a supercomputer or one that's really pretty powerful to separate the heat signatures and changes, heat and cold, of mankind's activities on the landmass from those that are geo-produced temperature differentials and charge differentials. I'm sure we could do it. The same thing applies. But, I suppose if we could get the government to put sensors, charge sensors along known fault lines, major fault lines like Madrid and stuff, that we could get the warning ahead by doing that, and they may be doing that now. Okay, there are a lot of sensors around the New Madrid area. I see them on the maps here. A lot of sensors that may also be measuring the electric component, which does give us a sneaky clue that something's about to happen. I can't do it, but the government can.
Is this kind of like, now I've heard with big earthquakes like what Japan had with Fukushima, people reported seeing circles in the sky. I don't know if they were cloud circles or energy circles of some sort. Is that would that cause something like that?
I hadn't heard circles before. I've heard balls of light popping up out of the ground.
Okay, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, and I think that's what we would normally call ball lightning or ionized gas bubbles. And these are likely to occur where you have this tremendous pressure undersea there or along the coastline producing electric charge, which is released, but sometimes it can be released in a manner that's similar to when severe lightning strikes and it can't find a place to unload all of its charge in that lightning bolt, and it hits like a roadblock on the Earth, and bang, it bounces up and forms a spinning sphere of charged particles. I think it's something similar to that that's caused by the mechanical action as well as the electric action of a fault line. There are definitely changes that occur in the sky, and in animal behavior just before a major quake. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I always tell people, if you see the animals acting funny, then, something, there's your sensors right there.
Yeah, well,
yeah. What are some of the key fault lines of concern right now? I mean, do you expect any major activity in any of them anytime soon?
Yes. Every day Holly puts up the maps after I figure them out on the website. Currently, in the last month, when I say current, in the last month, a little bit over a month, probably 6 weeks, I've been seeing a lot of Richter 5 plus, up into the 7s earthquakes on the left side of the Ring of Fire in the Pacific. And that's the fault line that runs from Kamchatka Island in Russia down through Japan and down into the Philippines and down through New Guinea and over into New Zealand through a zigzag kind of path. That's the left side of the Ring of Fire around the Pacific. Now, there's been like 4 to 1, 4 times as many of these larger earthquakes occurring there than normal when compared to the major earthquakes over in the west coast of South America and the United States and Central America. Some of these quakes on the west side that have been increasing in number and magnitude drifted all the way around into the islands of Indonesia on the west side, close to, what are we looking at, Sumatra and Singapore. I'm just looking at my map here, where we've had, again, an increase of these larger quakes. And there, by the way, I'll get back to this in a minute, but there's something happening in the North Indian Ocean, has been for the last 8 days, which is really, really unusual. We'll get to that in a second. Now, back over on the eastern side of the Pacific Ring of Fire, we're now starting to see pressure zones build up for earthquakes and volcanoes. They both get the same kind of signature, more than we have ever seen or I've ever seen before in the 17 years that I've been doing this. There are 4 actual zones from the southern part of Mexico all the way down to Ecuador. And on their coastlines, we're getting consistent thermal and electrical anomalies there that do not go away. Normally these had happened, and about a day to 4 days later you get an earthquake, big deal, okay, it was an earthquake there. But these are hanging on, and this is not good. Now, I did read recently that there's a considerable opinion saying that there's going to be a new plate breaking loose, a tectonic plate, in northwest Africa there, in that area where I'm seeing all this activity, and that might be the reason we're seeing these thermal and electrical signals, is that plate is about to fracture. Now, if you go up the coastline from there to the Baja and up near the Salton Sea in Southern California, and up into Oregon and into Washington State, where they have the Juan de Fuca plate, that area is also starting to see some activity, but not enough to panic yet. And the Baja thing down in California, not enough to panic yet. I am expecting to see, to balance things, I'm expecting to see an increase in larger earthquakes, Richter 5s and above, on the west coast of the United States from Washington State all the way down to the Baja, and then also in Central America, Mexico, and northwest side of South America, plus down into Chile and Peru. But when these come up, I report them with circles, and if they're something really to warn people about, I put alert and point to it and explain and say, we've got a problem here, let's keep an eye on it and get your earthquake or volcano preps in order. Now, the anomaly I was talking about over in the North Indian Ocean is something that I can guess at the cause, but I'm not sure. For the last 7 to 8 days now, it's been building. It's 5 zones of extreme heat. Now, this is just thermal. This is not electrical. Extreme heat in these 5 zones. It's 3 right across at the equator, and then 2 up on either side of the country of India. Now, I've never seen this before ever, and it just hangs on and hangs on. I've had Holly put those up on the website in the page that we use, the front page, the news page. So you'll see it in today's news down about, well, it's probably the second big picture there on the left side. And there are 2 links, one to the animations of the day's changes, and then the net effect in the Indian Ocean. Now, I think what is happening is that because the Earth is expanding, and I think this is causing a lot of the sinkholes as well, it is stretching the surface of the Earth, and there's a hot magma flow, or maybe 5 plumes of hot magma underneath the mantle, pushing up to try to break through in the North Indian Ocean. Now, this happened, something like this happened eons ago in biblical terms before the time, or around the time of Peleg, the meaning the dividing of the continents, when the Earth broke, the continents broke, rather, and were spread apart as the Earth expanded to, where we are now, which is about 25% larger than it used to be before the time of the continental breakup. So there was something then that pressed on this area to force Africa to separate from Australia and Indonesia and all that, to spread apart. You can see it in the mud maps, or the bathymetry maps of the Indian Ocean, where it really stretched the surface hard there. This may be occurring again, and I have no idea why it picks on that spot on the planet, but it is a heat signature, primarily, totally, a heat anomaly that I've never seen before. And so I'm telling people over there, kind of pay attention. You might have a problem. Those are the
that's fascinating. Now, if that happens, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. If that happens, what?
I say if that happens, that will affect more than just that area of the planet, wouldn't it?
Oh yes, oh yes. We're not isolated from that. No,
No.
In fact, I've thought about that, and what's that? About 182.70. Let me just do a calculation. I'm trying to see how far away that is from the other side of the planet in the Atlantic. Okay, that's 2.5 there. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That is interesting. If that's inside the planet, something pushing up and causing heat to rise up in the North Indian Ocean and at the equator, then if you go over to the other side of the planet at the equator to see what's in the antipodal or opposite position of these heat signatures, you'll see that it lands you up in the 90-degree west latitude, longitude. Yes, about the same. It's strange enough exactly where the plate is breaking in Mexico, Central America, and Ecuador. In essence, on the northwest side of South America. The heat signatures are underneath that on the other side of the planet. So is this meaning that the pressure of the plate breakup over there is causing the temperature rise in the Indian Ocean, or vice versa? I don't know, but those two, I've just now discovered it. Look at the map I'm talking to you. Those are exactly opposite of each other on the planet. That's weird.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is strange. So what do you think we're seeing here? What does this all mean? I mean, what is causing the planet to get so active all of a sudden?
Well, it's a thing that I think is a natural progression in the aging of planets, and moons, and stars, and galaxies. As they age, they dissipate energy in their spin, which gives them gravity, and they expand. Every planet in the solar system that I've been able to check with NASA photos shows signs of at least 20% expansion or more in the diameter of the planet since it had a solid surface, except for the gas giants. You can't tell there, but there are moons you can tell. So it's like a ballerina doing a pirouette, and she's got her arms in tight. She's spinning fast. She yawns, "I'm getting tired of this," and she stretches her arms out. As she does, she slows down. And basically that's an analogy that I would apply to the situation. That's why the Earth is about to go through another expansion stage. It's time. Now, the sun does that too, and we might be seeing something interesting there now.
Yeah, that was my next question, is the sun. What's going on with our sun? And, a lot of people are wondering if they should be concerned about what's going on.
All right. Before I just answer that question on the sun, I forgot you asked me about earthquake zones I was looking at. Another is the New Madrid. Now, it's harder to detect changes that are going to affect the New Madrid for me because there's not water up close to the northern side of it. But it follows the Mississippi riverbed down, and a branch of it goes off through Arkansas. So what I do look at is the Gulf of Mexico along the Louisiana coast for signatures of seismic activity there. And last week there was one, I think. I'm not sure that I caught it. It was such a small signature, but an earthquake did occur there. Now, with the sinkholes occurring in Louisiana, and they will continue to occur offshore as well, because there are a lot of those salt domes off in the Gulf of Mexico along the Louisiana coast and going eastward toward Florida. As it does, these things are going to stretch and break and fall in on themselves. Natural progression, even without our help. But that might be a trigger that releases pressure along the New Madrid fault line going up toward the Great Lakes, and it might contribute to it having an earthquake, Richter 8 or better. That's earthquakes. Now back to your sun problems. It's a strange thing because NASA has been saying, and is still saying, that this 24th sunspot cycle on the sun is the grand solar maximum right now. And they've said this is the biggest solar maximum since they started keeping records in the late 1500s. Well, now, not they, but astronomers. And unfortunately, they say this, but when you look at the number of sunspots that are occurring right now, it's supposed to be the peak, it's below average. It's not even high. Yet, although the sunspots are not heavy, the number of coronal holes, they call them, they're black areas on the sun when you look underneath the chromosphere where we see all the light and stuff and the sunspot. You dig down deep in that with some of the other types of frequencies they monitor from the sun, and you'll see there are more of these holes forming underneath, big holes. I mean, like, a sixth of the sun that you can see on one side going, having these dark coronal holes, and maybe even a third at some times. And from these, we're seeing strange magnetic anomalies spinning, funnels and vortices of magnetic fields and hot plasma gas, and erupting and throwing out coronal mass ejections. And we're seeing more of those at the moment, have been for some time, in this supposedly the maximum of this sunspot cycle. Now then, the solar physicists are saying, well, it's not a maximum, but maybe, well, it's dipping down a bit. It'll dip down a bit later this year, but then it'll punch back up and make a second maximum in 2014. And so it'll be a double hump, a double sunspot peak for this cycle, which is fairly rare.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is also unknown by a lot of people in the public, because they don't pay attention to this in detail, is that right now the sun itself is in the process of flipping its north and south pole, reversing them. Now, it does this every 11 years, and so every 22 years things are back to normal. But because the Earth's magnetic field is weakening, and no secret there, it is now a little bit flimsy in its north-south alignment strength. Suppose that we get a huge coronal mass ejection the next year or two from the sun. It's charged, it's protons coming at us, and there's a magnetic, like Catherine wheel effect coming out from the sun and the solar wind. It hits our planet constantly with varying densities and speeds. Now, if it starts to flip its pole, it's going to affect the solar wind polarity, which will then try to flip upside down our own magnetic field in our planet. So we have to watch it. Yeah, the drifting in the North Pole is twice as fast as the South Pole at the moment, in the magnetic pole. And if that does occur, during the transition, our magnetic field will be even weaker. And there will be, if it starts to wobble, even not flip, but starts to wobble, it's going to weaken our shield from solar and stellar radiation that protects us, especially from ultraviolet. Because our shield is our ionosphere and our Van Allen belts, and these things help to deflect all these heavy radiations. If we lose that or weaken it down to a point that it's ineffective, it's like being in Starship Enterprise and you yell for shields and there ain't none, Captain. The incoming radiation will hit hot spots all over the planet, and that ultraviolet radiation, I've experienced it, to a small degree, when the ozone layer had a hole in it over Perth, Australia when I was there. And it hurts. It makes your eyes weep just looking outside, even with sunglasses. It hurts going through your clothes like pinpricks, sticking your skin through your solid clothes. Now, that was a minor effect of it. I've seen and talked to people, it was happening in an island off the north coast of South America there, and it was when the South Atlantic anomaly, which is a hole in our magnetic field, when it broadened and the very edge, the very weak edge of it drifted that time for about 2 or 3 days up over these islands there. And when it did, we started getting calls from people saying, look, this has something to do with the sun. Our children are getting headaches and nausea and rashes on their skin, and they can't be outside in the sun. It hurts. And adults, same thing is happening to them. And people, the doctors at the hospitals were having case after case, and they couldn't figure out what was causing it. Well, it was a type of radiation sickness from the increased ultraviolet that had gotten through that hole when it weakened just momentarily in Earth time.
So if the magnetic poles should flip, then we've got a lot more to worry about than just refrigerator magnets falling off the fridge, huh?
Yeah, a lot more than that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting thing this is developing now, because in the biblical prophecies in the book of Revelation, it does speak about the light of the moon will be 7 times as bright. It'll be like the light of the day, but like it'll be 7 times as bright. And if you look at that being reflected light from the sun, then you'd say, wow, if the sun's light was 7 times brighter than it is now, we'd all cook, fry, and die. But it's light in a particular wavelength, so you don't particularly burn, like infrared, but it gets so bright, it's the radiation is chewing through your skin. And that, I think, is what the Bible is talking about. Men will hide in caves and throw rocks on them to hide them from the wrath of the Almighty, being the energy coming from the sun, and our shields being down. And the ultraviolet penetration can be 7 times as bright. It's blue-white, but it's not cooking you like pure sunlight would at the beach. And you can't hide from it. I'm sure that along with it there will be an increase in infrared radiation, and I'm sure at that time that our roads that have asphalt or tar in them will melt, and tires will melt and explode on cars and things like that. It's going to get hot, and what we're seeing now with the sun is leading the way to what may very well be in the prophecy.
And I'll tell you, Stan, I noticed just last summer, I worked outside most of my life, and I never burned up. I always, tanned gradually. And last summer, I got out in the sun, I think I was probably within 15, 20 minutes, and I had burns on my neck, burns on my arms.
Where are you located?
In Columbia, South Carolina. And,
right.
I fried. Yeah.
That is. So, that's up about 35 degrees north latitude. Yeah, if you'd have been down, Actually, you were just above where the islands down there, I'm talking about off of the north coast of South America, where the South Atlantic anomaly caused those people to have trouble there on the island. I don't know where this thing was last year, but normally it stays down in the South Atlantic, and it's not a problem. But it spreads out to be a big hole periodically. So you may have caught something there on the edge.
Yeah, quite possibly. All right, Stan, hang on for a moment. We've got to take a break, big time, with your website. I mean, you really do keep the information flowing over there.
Well, that's Holly. She does that every 6 days a week. She gets up at 4:30 to do that. So I kind of read it when I get time, like the rest of you. But she puts all that up there.
Wow, it's a lot of work. I know.
It is.
Yes, it is. Stan, I was saving this for later, but I'll get to it now because a lot of people who are listening are curious as to where you stand with the whole Planet X scenario. A lot of people believe that has something to do with the sun's activity and the changes on the planet. Where do you stand with that whole scenario?
Well, as yet, I've not seen any proof that such a planet is approaching close enough to do us any damage. For years, NASA's been looking for a mystery 10th planet that was perturbing the orbits of Uranus and Neptune, compressing them down a bit from where they should be. But I've recently, I guess in the last week, I've gotten some emails saying they've got photos of it taken in the southern hemisphere because you can't see it in the northern hemisphere, and that might be true. I have done studies with the with Excel and doing formulas for the orbits of the planets and the speeds of them, this kind of thing. And so I plugged into my computational formula there the theoretical data for where the orbits of planets have to be or where they can be stable around our sun. And in the process of researching, I found a formula that fits our solar system perfectly, and it tells you where a planet has to orbit rather than using what's called Bode's law, which is a guess. This was a first principle calculation of the volume of space around the sun and differences going out. Now, having said that, I calculated the stable orbits for planets around the sun going out, probably 2,000 times the distance of Earth to see, how many orbits would be stable. And I found one that was, I think it was at about, was it 75 times the distance of the Earth from the sun, mean orbit? Anyway, I did find one out there and calculated its velocity, which is, assuming it has an elliptical orbit around the sun, and was able to find that a planet could exist in that orbit. And to my surprise, the orbital time of that going around the sun once would be, believe it or not, 3,611 years, plus or minus about 10 years. And that's supposed to be the orbit of this Nibiru, this Planet X, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a stable orbit there that, fits the timing of what they talk about as Planet X. Now, we are seeing more surprise meteors striking the Earth of late, or coming close, even becoming meteorites. We're seeing, it would appear, more sun-grazing comets, which have gotten too close to the sun as they passed around and caused coronal mass ejections to rip off the sun just after the comet grazer passes the sun's surface at close point. We've got this comet Ison down in November. It's probably going to cause massive coronal mass ejections on the surface of the sun as it goes around. This is part of a bunch of debris that may be triggered by a larger mass moving in our solar system. I do not think that we're going to see a large planetary body, like Planet X type thing, come close to the Earth at all. But will we suffer effects from it if such a thing does exist and does come into the minor planet's sphere of influence here inside the orbit of Jupiter? It could disrupt our orbits, even though they don't come close to the planet itself or planets themselves. It can cause shock waves in the fluid of space, let's call it, the fabric of space, which is what causes a stable orbit to form. And if it shakes that, then it could affect the length of our year, the span of our planet, earthquakes, volcanoes, heating, cooling, and strange places. A lot of things could happen. But as yet, I haven't seen data that I would say, yeah, Planet X is there and they're holding it back. And I've got astronomer friends, amateurs, that have got big enough stuff, except for infrared scopes, to be able to see such an object as that, and they would tell me. But so far, I've got no proof in.
Fascinating. I've seen evidence. Well, I won't say evidence, but I've seen good material on both sides of the argument. And certainly, I'm where you are. I think that it's very possible that this thing could be out there. I have seen pictures and videos, but again, I don't know the people personally who are taking the pictures and putting the videos out there. I can only say, like I tell everybody who listens, you can deny a lot, but you can't deny that we're definitely going through changes. Whatever you think might be causing them, fine. The fact is, it's happening. And, NASA actually put out an article not long ago. I had shared it with the listeners here on this show a few nights ago, that they have found that there's apparently a couple brown dwarf stars that are in some kind of orbit behind the sun somewhere. So I don't know if that might be
well, no, I hadn't seen that. I hadn't seen that.
No?
I'd have to look that up to talk on it, but it would obviously be way out. I don't think it's within the what do they call it? The mean solar diameter or the system diameter, because the sun's influence, the actual solar system envelope, goes out so far that if you went to the edge of our solar system and traveled at the speed of light through the center of the solar system to the other side, that you would take a year to get from one side of our solar system to the other. That's the farthest extent. Now, if those two brown dwarf stars are out there, I don't know that they would be inside that sphere, the heliopause or not. But, well, look, it's kind of academic at this point to argue the point until we've got something hard to do. Some of those videos you're talking about, I got video and I got pictures from people over in California saying, look here's the sun that almost at sunset, and off to the lower left was, Planet X, right there on the photograph and on the video. Well, I got the time that the guy took the picture, where he was standing, what the date was, and put it into Stellarium and put myself in his position, wound it back. And it was a not totally uncommon thing for the moon to set at the same time close to the sun there. And I wound it back to the minute where he was standing looking at his photographs. He had a time stamp on them. And it was the moon. Just at sunset, it's enlarged because it's on the horizon and the air there's more air between you and that, so optically it expands it bigger, like a magnifying glass. And it was the moon, but they were all getting excited. Oh, Planet X, a mystery thing by the sun. Wow. And so I saw zillions of emails come by and people on blogs talking about it. And I thought, well, I'm not going to argue with them, but there it is. One little misstep, and the internet goes wild.
Yeah, and I've been guilty of that myself. I've gone out there and I've taken pictures, and briefly we'll get excited and think, hey, and not that I want to find this thing. I hope that it's not true, but I tend to think that there's something up there. I just don't know if it's as bad as everybody's been saying it is, if it's going to come as close as everyone thinks it is. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there we don't know about, and we have been getting a lot of close objects to the planet lately, asteroids and comets, impacting, and it would make one think, okay, why is all this happening all of a sudden? So, I had to ask the question.
Well, there are changes. Have you ever read any of Immanuel Velikovsky's works?
No, sir.
People, Worlds in Collision? Well, he did a very in-depth study in several books on the ancient world and the legends that people talked about, the gods fighting in the sky and this and that, and related it back to astronomical events. One of the things I found interesting was that from the ancient legends, in one of the cultures, I forget which it was, they talked about this object in the sky, really, calling it a god, that came across the sky and had made war with another one and then moved on in toward the sun in the sky. Now, he put that down. He did a much better job than I'm doing here of describing it, and it was the planet Venus. Now, Mars, god of war, some of the old legends, he thinks would have been involved. He thinks that Venus could have been either a planet that was, say, in the asteroid belt originally, or further out, that came wandering in and bounced through the orbits until it took up a stable orbit where it is now. It is the only planet in our system that we know of that rotates backwards to everybody else. And it's slowing up, and I think eventually it will flip over and right itself, because these stable orbits demand that everything rotate the same way with the sun, eventually, if you want to be stable. So this is a recent event, and it's still slowing down. There are pieces of debris in the asteroid belt. If you add up, it doesn't make a very big planet at all. But then Mars, right next to the asteroid belt, has two moons that are odd-shaped rocks that NASA thinks one of them may even be hollow at the moment. But on the surface of Mars itself, there's a large scar made by the impact of a small moon. I calculated roughly 300 to 400 miles in diameter that broke up, and when it did, the fan-shaped impact, it was spread around the surface of Mars. At the northern edge of it is the Cydonia area, where they have all those crystalline shapes that came out of the inside of a small moon. These things all tell us that there are things that do change position in our system. And right now, it may be one of those times.
Yeah, it might be. Now, you said NASA actually believes that one of these moons might be hollow. They actually said that? I'm surprised.
Yeah, it's hollow or have cavities in it, and I've looked at the imagery and data on it, and it's possible. It's a very odd-looking moon, with one end of it that looks kind of like the dish on the front of the Starship Enterprise, covered with dust that's had impacts of one or two strikes of some other object in orbit or somewhere else. But it doesn't behave as though it were solid all the way through, gravitationally or inertially or whatever. And I just read the article just a few days ago. I'd have to look it up to tell you where, but yeah, there's something odd about it. And, of course, the underground is saying, aha, it's really a spaceship put up by some culture, blah, 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 and it's, lost in the dust of time collected on it. And that may be true, but I don't think NASA's saying that at all. It's just saying it's a kind of a porous or a rock with cavities in it because its mass density doesn't match what it should be for the type of rock that they see on it. Anyway, it's worth people looking into. I'd certainly encourage people to look that up.
Yeah, I've been told by many that they believe our moon is hollow, and I don't know. I guess I'd have to go up there and see it for myself. I guess anything's possible, but
let me agree with you. Let me agree with you. I think that the moon could very well be hollow. Most planets and moons do have cavities of emptiness inside of them. Small moons end up having just one cavity. Have you ever seen a geode and picked up one of those round rocks that they cut open at the gym shows, all the little crystals inside?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now think about it. That's a solid stone that was burped up from some volcano, thrown into the air and cooled as it was coming down, and it was full of spinning magma from the volcano. So it cooled over a period of time, and when it cooled, and we came along here a few thousand years later and broke it open, we find that it's not solid all the way through. It has a cavity in the center. It is hollow. And that's because when it cooled, the mass inside there, or when it cooled slowly, let me say, the mass inside there started to make crystals on the outer side where it was cooler. And those crystals took up less space than they did as random molecules floating around in this hot state. As they crystallized completely, it left nothing but a vacuum, an open space there inside that stone. And it's an oversimplification of the gravitational process, but I think that all moons, all planets, and possibly stars, as well as galaxies, have a hollow core or a hollow shell or shells within them. I mean, even now they say our galaxy, the Milky Way, has a supermassive black hole in the center of it. Now, that's a kind of cavity and a kind of hollowness, and I think it probably is because it sucks in mass and energy and burps it out at the polar regions every now and then as super intense gamma rays and other types of radiation it shoots out. And then it closes up the poles and starts gathering more energy. So, yes, I think the moon could very well have cooled slowly and that the core of it is vacant. I don't know how thick the surface would be, but the early seismographic tests on the moon from the Apollo series did indicate that it rang like a bell. And duh, that's hollow.
Now, do you think they've been totally honest with us as far as, I have no doubt that they went to the moon. My doubts have kind of been on what they've told us about what they found on the moon. Do you think they've been honest, or do you think they're hiding something up there?
I don't think they've been truthful with us on it. I do think there are things they've left out of the press on purpose. I think that they tolerate the alien UFO scenarios around the planet, as long as it suits their purposes to hide other things. But when you get too close to it and start saying, well, okay, we found evidence of, intelligent life had built buildings or something on the moon, or, then it starts to become a serious issue the government has to address. The biggest problem is this. Until you have a one-world government, telling people that, the gods have returned and we're keeping from it, we're going to let you know now, telling people this is going to absolutely knock the slats out from under all the different religions and political structures built upon that, cultural structures. It would almost produce, without doubt, anarchy across the planet. That's why I think that we're headed for a one-world government rapidly, and they will be announcing then some of the stuff, not all of it, I'm sure, but some of the stuff that they've been hiding. And I know, having worked on one project, that today even you don't know, the public doesn't know that we have anti-gravity and have built our own saucer craft and, can walk through solid metal doors inside the craft by pushing a button and cutting a door out and then putting it back in place and re-welding it just at the push of a button. These are things that are science fiction in the ultimate, but we've had them for a number of decades now.
That's fascinating right there. Now, so I've been saying for a while that I think some of the crafts that people say that they've seen, and I've seen some myself, some could very well be our own governments. And that would say that they've got the technology from E.T. maybe.
Well, not necessarily. Some of it, yes. The early days of this, there were some engineers who did kind of stumble onto the idea in the mid-50s, I think it was. Now, it could have been that they stumbled onto it with a bit of help, and that's just the explanation that I was told. But basically, they observed the solar system and the galaxy and other galaxies in the universe, and they saw they all had spiral motion to them around the center. And from that, they determined what gravity was. It was a sum of two waveforms, spinning waveforms, reflecting from space itself back into the spinning system. And from that, they were able to determine how gravity, which appears to be a one-dimensional force, one direction, is really the sum of two forces acting, one toward the planet, one away from it, or one from toward the surface of the sun or away from it, etc. It's a sum of two. The net result is at our radius from the center of our planet that we're attracted or appear to be attracted down toward the core of the planet. But anyway, they did figure this out, but there were other things, I'm sure, that were part of the agreement with the alleged quote-unquote aliens that in the early 50s, in the agreement we had with them, the treaty, that they would give us technology in return for letting them do some genetic experiments on livestock and humans. It didn't go too well after that, but anyway, that was so. Some of it was our stuff, some of it was theirs, and we have tried to develop things. I'm sure, as we were doing at the time, even up to the late 70s, develop our own technologies away from the shared facilities that our scientists had with these gray-looking critters, usually underground and under the ice cap at the South Pole.
I see. Now we're talking about the whole UFO thing. I guess in the one world government, I'm wondering what do you think is going to become? I mean, we've got Korea, China, Russia, and it seems like this Obama administration has been more of a dictation. We have the missile shield anomaly going on, and it seems like if Earth changes don't kill us, maybe these wars might. What do you think is going to happen here? I mean, do you think this is all a distraction for possibly bringing on a false flag alien attack type deal, or what do you think?
Well, that was originally the plan. If there were no aliens, we were going to invent them. And it was a simple reason. After the close of World War II and the results of the two atom bombs over Japan, the Western world, the Allies, they said, look, we cannot afford the next war. It will decimate the planet, and there won't be any winners in that. So they said, look, we've seen the League of Nations fail, and we've seen the United Nations already failing in its infancy, where you've got now like 196 member nations, and you've got to try to get 2 or 3 of them to agree on a common point, and that's difficult. Needless to say, 196 of them, get them to agree on a common religion, a common economy, common laws, common culture. It's going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible. They also knew that Hitler had tried to use force to get, say, like France, to join the German Union, as it were. And the resistance in France kept blowing up bridges, killing officers and people in the Nazi hierarchy there in France. So the French resistance was an example of how people would not toe in. They would find ways to sabotage a forced order. They said, well, how can we get the people? We can get the leaders of various countries to agree. They're easy to manipulate. But how can we get the people, the masses, who have been raised with various cultural and religious biases, to agree to change everything in favor of a one world religion, a one world culture, all this kind of stuff? How can we do that? And basically what the third option was, alternative 3, was this. We will fly in an alien landing all over the planet. We will develop the technology quietly, underground, and we will confront the people of the world with a group of individuals with advanced technology and allegedly from off the planet in a peaceful place, the Federation of Planets or whatever, and say, look, we can let you be a victim of the crisis curves now facing you and your eventual destruction of each other by nuclear war, or we can show you how we do it and set up a friendly one-planet government with one leader, and it will have an equal economy for everyone. We'll get rid of poverty. We'll heal cancer, all this kind of stuff. Now, people need to think that they are in trouble. and certainly there have been things exaggerated in the media for several decades now, and they're getting worse, about the threat of, meteor impacts destroying life, extinction level event, earthquakes, big threat, diseases, pandemics, big threat, nuclear war, big threat, collapse of the world economy, big threat, overpopulation and dwindling resources and famine, emerging threat right now. Now, these can be played up and exaggerated in the press to get people's attention if need be, and I think that's, in some cases, what is happening. Far in advance of the actual events becoming a problem, these are being played up so that people all over the world are saying, oh, man, if one thing doesn't get you, then the other one will. And, what are the odds that we can beat all 6 or 7 of these major crisis curves that we know about? Oh, alien invasion, that's not really on our radar at the moment, as much as these other things that are real practical dangers that we can see every day in the news and we can touch and feel. Yet the planners said, look, okay, if we do fly in this crowd and we do convince them to try that one world government for long enough that they can see that it works and we can have a peaceful planet, then we will have saved the planet from the next war, et cetera, et cetera. You and I both know, if you study prophecy, that this is what is happening now, is that a great deception is at foot. This alleged alien business, although I never met these gray critters when I worked with Dr. Teller's group developing anti-gravity stuff, I heard about them. And as far as I'm concerned, they had no soul. They were biological robots, cyborgs, if you wish, that performed the duties of the real aliens, if you wish, which were Satan and those who came with him when they were kicked out of the heavens above us, the parallel universe, into the earth for one last great battle. And all that these grays were nasty critters that we had to deal with, and they were doing experiments and abductions on people and mutilating cattle and stuff. Basically, they frightened the people of the earth that they were here, and our governments wouldn't admit it to us. Oh, what are they keeping a secret for? These things are terrible, getting worse and worse. They are the enemy. Now, Satan and his minions that look they're basically human, will appear with their technology right at the height of our crisis curve when we think the end is near, and offer us that solution. They're going to do what we were planning to do after World War II, as a psychological method of trying to unify the planet. Satan is going to do that, and he's going to appoint and support a human dictator of the planet, basically a king they will call him, but basically it'll be a dictator. Using their technology, he will bring all the nations to heel and make them form this one world government. The people really won't have to be drug in because it'll be someone that's offering them goodies, free energy, anti-gravity, new medicine, this kind of stuff. And with beings like Satan who have lived and still are living, who have lived a long time, thousands of years, if not longer, they can produce video and audio records of even the crucifixion of Jesus himself because they were there at the time passing through. So this will certainly open people's eyes when they see this and say, wow, that's really incredible. This must be, the Messiah's team here. And this is what we're headed for. That's the next major event, the Grand Deception, and why it is in play. Whether man does it or whether Satan does it, that will be the next thing. And this will be a deception headed up by an evil character. And for a few years, it will work, but that's all.
So now, what if the real Messiah shows up, or what if real aliens were to show up? I mean, how would we know the difference? So we get fooled either way, even though we know about this.
It's such a clever deception that even the very elect, Matthew 24 says, would not be able to tell the difference. But basically, it's the degree of technology. If they say the Messiah is here in this secret place or in orbit or somewhere else, you can visit him there if we give you permission, then they are not the real dudes. Jesus says, when I return with my army to claim the title deed to earth and set it up properly, every living thing on the planet will know that I am coming. All the nations will see me as I come in the clouds of heaven at once. As the lightning flashes from the east to the west, you will see me. It won't be limited to little spaceships going around that are a mile in diameter and stuff and floating over cities and impressing people. He will not hide. Everyone will see him, and he won't need TV to do it. Every living thing will feel and sense his presence, one way or another. So it does tell you that's the real Messiah. The make-believes are here only with technology they've been able to put together here on the earth since they arrived, because they were kicked out of the heavens and they didn't get to take much with them. That's why they made a deal with us in the early 50s at Holloman Air Force Base to have joint research facilities underground and hidden away from the human mob, so that they could develop their own technologies but mainly so they could also develop infrastructure to build those technologies way in advance of what we even know now, even having worked with them. It was infrastructure they needed to build the weapons. So when you see beings allegedly from off the planet, well, they are. They're not from around here, but they're from the heavens. When you see them using limited technology and not across the heavens, like Jesus is talking about, it will be planetary, planet-wide. It will be amazing, brilliant, and not hidden away. He will come and you will see him. All eyes will see him. You won't have to go to a secret place to meet him or film him. The one
so
that is
I was going to say, so
basically,
if E.T. should land and say, "Take me to your leader," then he might be okay. But if he comes down and says, "Hey, I'm the Messiah," Jesus, obviously, I don't think he'd have to say something like that. I think he'd feel it.
Oh, you'd know it.
Yeah.
And the ET you're talking about, I think that this is a protected planet under the current reason for mankind being here. It's part of a virtual courtroom to settle a dispute in the heavens. The Stargates are not a new invention. They were talked about in the book of Ezekiel and the Tower of Nimrod, or the Tower of Babel, which Nimrod built. All these indicate about the gates to the parallel universe that our scientists are just now recognizing. So, like a protective veil, if you wish, or like a shield around Earth, only allowing what is happening now, the beings that were cast out and humans to exist in here. And beings from other worlds, other galaxies, other star systems, I don't even know if they're there or if this whole thing is a total virtual reality, the whole universe. But they will not be allowed to screw up what is happening, as far as I know. And this will go according to plan as it is in the book of the Revelation of John and the book of Daniel.
Okay. Well, let's take a call, Stan. We've got Papa Bear on the line. Papa Bear, are you with us?
Hey, yes, I am. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening.
I've been hearing you talk about anti-gravity and such like that. Do you have any blueprints or plans for anti-gravity or cold fusion energy or something like that?
To be released? No. Do I know how it works? Yes. In fact, I am writing a paper on the general theory, but not with circuit diagrams for a number of very practical reasons at this point. But I can tell you that gravity, and hence anti-gravity, if you want to call it that, is a function of a complex interaction between two current-carrying conductors, like coils. And they are at right angles and wrapped in a spiral thing around a donut, if you wish, a torus, with a chunk cut out of it on one side, about an eighth of the circle cut out. You can pulse energy, electricity, into one coil, and then release the pulse. And as you get the back EMF from that pulse, you trap that, sending it into the other coil, which is at right angles everywhere its windings touch the other coil. And add to that pulse another input. So now you've got two pulses of input in the second coil. You release it, and you've got two pulses coming back as back EMF. You direct those into the first coil and add another. Now you have three direct current pulses, and you keep doing this until you build up the limit of the field, which basically is the pure resistive load of the coils. In 30-foot diameter crafts that we were building, the coils were about, the wire in them were flat wire, about, I think it's 4.5 to 5 inches wide by about ½ inch thick. They had to be built in sections and clipped together because it was hard to bend them. But
okay.
Yeah, that's anti-gravity.
The reason why I asked is because this is a Dr. Kesh with the Kesh Foundation. He's from Iran, and he did release information on how to make those items. That's why I was wondering.
Did you read his documents on the anti-gravity stuff? Did you see them?
I do have them, yes. I've looked over them briefly. I've only had them for about 2 days now. But yes, I have looked over them briefly, and I'm still doing some more studying.
Does he have any spin or spiral circuits in there at all?
I believe so. I'd have to look at it again. But he also uses gases in there. There's certain gases like nitrogen and argon and some others.
Well, I don't know why he would be releasing that, but the gravity is a function of spin of the fine structure of space. What James Clerk Maxwell a couple of centuries back called the ether space, AETHER space. It's a fine structure, fluid, and it behaves like a fluid. And the spin around the central point is what produces gravity. And a byproduct of gravity, or incorporated in it, are magnetic fields that are dynamic fields created by this spin around a central point in the fluid of space. No object that has gravity will be without spin.
Exactly.
It'll have the spin of its atoms, or it'll have the spin of itself. But there's molecular gravity, and then there's object gravity above that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I did get these basic blueprints. They're not exact. They're not made out to scale or anything like that. You know, that's something I'll have to figure out on my own. But I think the reason why he released these is because, first of all, anybody who's tried to sell anything for profit has wound up, shall we say, missing. You know how that goes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what is his website like the big picture, the 2012 big picture, or is it something else? Keshe Foundation?
No, it's keshefoundation.org. KESHE.
Oh, SHE. Right. I was just looking up while we were talking to see, and I had misspelled it.
Right, there's quite a bit there. I mean, the technology he has is not just anti-gravity and cold fusion. There's also things for health benefits and stuff like that. Also things for extracting elements and so on.
Now, does he charge anything for blueprints or whatever? Or data?
No, sir. Not that I know of.
All right. Just curious to see if it was kind of a subtle scam or whether it was truly a...
Right. Well, I've also encountered another place called the One People's Public Trust, and they're distributing those blueprints on their site as well. It's a whole lot is going on nowadays. So, and that's quite another part of it.
Well, being basically ignorant of his website and details of it, I just now looked at it, 30 seconds. I can't really comment with authority on what he is saying and how close it is to what we were doing, but it is interesting if he is truly releasing it. Now, would you say he was a Iranian or Iraqi? What?
He's Iranian. He's from Iran.
Uh-huh.
He was
this is the guy who claimed that he had developed a anti-gravity, I guess a UFO, and Iran's president came out and said that he had that technology, right?
Is that right?
Well, actually, he's passed this on to a whole bunch of different governments. The U.S. was the last one to actually accept it, and of course, it changes the whole game. It's a game changer, especially when you're creating your own force fields. It's all for peaceful purposes. None of it is warfare at all.
Well, I'm kind of surprised at this. I guess our government could have been playing dumb, but we had that in the late 50s already, and so why would they even talk to this guy?
Oh, exactly. Well, I'm not sure.
This is what I don't understand. I mean,
well, that type of technology isn't widely broadcast. You know what I mean? It's very hush hush. It's something that they don't want the people to know. I don't care how long they've had it. Probably since before the 60s.
Well, are you saying that? But when did he release it to the U.S. government? In modern times?
Oh yeah. From what I saw in the paperwork, but I mean that could be why they wrote it off. But it could be they took it just to patronize him. I really don't know.
I don't either. I mean, he was born in 1958. I'm seeing here on his website flashing up. By the time when he was just born, we already had anti-gravity, and we're building craft. So. Well,
exactly. I mean, they had the Bell. Germany.
The Nazis had, yeah.
Oh yeah, exactly. And who knows what's going on in Antarctica?
Well, that's high jump, and so we had a base down there under the ice cap that you could only get to by submarine. I'm pretty sure it was with the German scientists and engineers that got away. I mean, there's quite a bit of study on before World War II about the Germans going down to the South Pole and eventually setting up Neuschwabenland. And it was under the ice pack and tunnels that went under there and long stretches where you had air bubbles and you had warm, cavities to build bases in.
Right.
So
well, it kind of makes me curious. I mean, we've had this technology for almost half a century, but none of it's getting out. I mean, I don't understand the reasoning behind it.
Well, it's all in an effort to set up a peaceful one-world government. And, it was a desperate move after World War II ended, as I was saying earlier in the program, to convince people to try a new one-world government, economy, political structure, etc., and religion, long enough so that they could show the people of Earth that we could all get along with different languages, whatever, and we could, equalize inequalities in living standards and stuff like that. But to do that, there had to be a release of technology from some group that had no religious connections to any country or any culture, did not appear to be from around here. They had no drum to beat. They came to help us in a time of crisis. That has to be a quote-unquote alien landing. And to do that with even, as I was saying, with Satan and the fallen ones being involved in our program, even with them, it took a finite amount of time to develop spacecraft and technologies here, from Earth-based infrastructure manufacturing processes. It took a finite amount of time, which we're coming to the end of, to build craft that would be a mile in diameter and still not fall apart from their own weight, as modern engineers would tell you that's impossible. But using gravitational nodes throughout the thing every 30 feet, it was not a problem. To show that kind of stuff takes time to actually build it, even underwater or under ice, and then get it out and test it, and then fly over and show people to impress them with the fact you come from somewhere way out there and with this technology. That's why it's been held back.
What I don't understand most is the cold fusion technology. It's proven to work, although a lot of it's quantum energy, dark matter and such. But it does work, and it doesn't require, there's no hazards from it. It's all clean energy. And why we've got this infatuation with oil and such. It really, I don't know. I'm puzzled.
I'm going to tell you from inside the organization why that is. They will release that technology to the public once they have secured a global government. The problem is that the crusades are still being fought. The old cotton tops that ran my group down in Australia, at lunch one day I got a clue to it. And basically what they are trying to do is to lock up all of our free energy electrical devices, and the cold fusion is one of them, and there's a thermionic device, and there's an atmospheric converter, a number of things that are not being released to the public on a commercial scale, so that we will continue to burn up the oil of the Islamic countries. We want to deplete their oil, which is the only thing they've got to offer the world as far as a commercial reality. Burn their oil up, and so that they are now totally dependent on us, our oil, our energy. And it was a crusades thing continued in our generation. The Jewish, Christian, Western nations against the Islamic nations, and it was an effort to win this battle rather than the one that we lost when Salahuddin took over, Jerusalem in the old days.
That's kind of what puzzles me, though. We're not going to deplete their oil system, their oil supply. We would have made a massive dent in it by now, and we haven't. Meanwhile, we're polluting the earth, and we're creating more wars, and it seems to me like it's all kind of based around a monetary system, which is, for the most part, slavery.
Well, all I can tell you is what I heard in the conversation, and that was their game plan was to isolate the oil supplies from the Muslim nations, using theirs, burning them up in Desert Storm 1 and 2, catch an oil field on fire. That's not a problem. Let it burn for a while, then put it out. Deplete the oil, and let them build large buildings and places and spend their money where it's going to be virtually useless to weaken their ability.
I see. Well, I thank you for your input. It was quite helpful. Thank you very much.
You betcha.
Thank you, Papa Bear. Appreciate the call, my friend. And, one thing's for sure is, the wars continue because, there's corporations and people who are getting rich off of it. And, it's for many reasons. And, the one world government, I guess in a perfect world, that would be nice. It's a nice thought. But I kind of like our borders right now, and I'd like to keep them.
Well, obviously, if you have a righteous person in charge of the planet, the one world government, like the Messiah will be, then, yeah, I'm in favor of a one world government. And sometimes I start lectures out like that when we're talking about that kind of stuff, and I'll say, well, yeah, look, I'm in favor of a one world government. And everybody goes, really? And yeah, run by the right person, the right group. And, that's the bottom line. We're pretty fallible. I couldn't run a one world government, even if I had, good advisors and stuff like that. I would make a mistake one day. I would get mad at somebody who didn't do something they were supposed to do and crunch them with the power of the office. And once you take that step you're in trouble from there on. Many dictators have proved that. So it takes someone who has the blueprint to the planet and to us to know exactly how to do it and not make mistakes.
Absolutely. Hey, Stan, before our next break comes up here, we got a break in about 9 minutes, and I want to come back and finish up with you. But I have another question I want to get out there, and it's whether you've seen these videos that others have been sharing on YouTube in different places. They record through night vision gear and what looks to be like thousands of UFOs in the upper atmosphere and, within close space of our planet. And I've seen these videos, and it's just amazing, all the objects that are flying around up there. Have you taken a peek at any of this?
Well, I've looked at it myself with night vision, Gen 4 stuff, and there are a lot of things moving around out there. Earth-made satellites that we're aware of, there are at least 5,000 of them in orbit around the planet, more going up and some coming down. There are fast-moving things, fast walkers, if you wish, way up there high, which could be theirs or our craft moving somewhere around the Earth. But it is interesting. It's like looking in a pond, with a microscope and seeing all the life forms zipping around in there. It's busy.
Yeah, it's very busy. And, I thought, well, okay, some of that's probably satellites, some of that's probably meteorites and so on. But then there's others that you'll see them hauling butt, then they stop, and they start going the other way. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's not a meteorite.
Yeah, definitely not. Our craft can do that, but that's, whatever it is, I don't know who it is or what they're doing.
All right. Hang on with me, Stan. We're going to take our last break with you here, and then Stan Dale's website. And Stan, something we haven't talked too much about here tonight. I don't know if we've touched on it at all, but that's the oceans rising. It's been brought to my attention that they have been rising steadily. I see a map also on your website with it had to do with sea level rises. Can you explain that just a little bit?
Well, that map is showing if just the polar ice caps melted rapidly, what sea level changes would take place on the coasts of the United States. Now, on the right side of the map, from the east coast of Texas all the way to the Atlantic, those shades of blue show from 100 feet and 200 feet and 500 feet intrusion by different shades. The likelihood of that happening is probably better now because of the sun and the heat coming from it and increased heating that is occurring in the melting of the poles. However, this is not enough to do more than about 200 to 500 feet maximum. The current figures released are 200 foot of sea level rise. Now, that would be pretty disastrous because, nearly 75 to 80% of the world live close to the coastal regions of their countries and estuaries that feed in or are fed by the ocean. Now, on the left side of that map, I have a different shade of blue and an explanation of it showing what the Hopi prophecies say is that northern Arizona, where they are, that they will be going between their mesas by canoe or boat when the earth changes take place on the west coast. Now, they live about a mile above sea level. That's just kind of pretty hard to do with the amount of water we've got on the planet, on the surface anyway. It would take a release of large amounts of the water stored in the Moho discontinuity about 5 to 15 miles deep under the surface of the earth. The other way is that California could drop down, or the ocean could rise up and the coast drop down, and perhaps massive earthquake movements under California, Arizona would drop the Hopi Reservation down to a level where it would be inundated by water from the sea, or at least come between the mesas. Now, another study, which I was led to do by a woman, scientist who was familiar with the area, and she said, look, what happens if we have an earthquake that causes the Grand Canyon to block up just, south of the area where the Hopi and the Navajo live, and the Colorado River flow and all the tributaries would flood that area? And I did run that some, and I put that on the website as well, under the links to show images, which I don't see up there at the moment. But anyway, somewhere down there we have a link to show images on our website where it says Dan's interview show images by the microphone. I don't know whether that's where you went or not, but as far as I could calculate it with the normal flow rates of the Colorado River, even if you blocked it off, it might take 15 to 20 years to fill up that area where the Hopi are, to sea level or to level between it, so you'd have to go by boat to get between the three mesas. Anyway, that's why that map is in there. It's just to show to fulfill prophecy by coastal flooding is almost impossible. It's going to have to be something else that causes that water to flow between the mesas there. On the east coast, on the right side of the map, all those are very accurate as far as water inundation if the land stays at the same level it's at and doesn't drop any further or rise any further.
I see. And what I find with a lot of people who aren't in the know about this type of thing, they go on and they just think that everything's going to be the same forever. And they just ignore past history and records that show that, the Earth has gone through these type of changes before. And, all I tell people is that they should be prepared because you never know what's going to come. And we've seen the weather pick up, superstorms, the earthquakes have picked up. the geoengineering, which I feel is a major problem and certainly contributing to some of our changes. What do you suggest people should do as far as being prepared? Because that's something I usually like to talk about when we speak about these things.
Well, as you know, Holly, my wife, wrote kind of the Prepper's Bible, 632 pages, 8.5, 11, called the Dare to Prepare book. And there are a lot of things in there, very detailed things that are very practical information for people to read about and see whether it applies to their situation or not. In that 632 pages, she's got about 69 chapters. And these chapters, each one of them, they deal with like solar cooking or communications or how you prepare for financial meltdown. Now, these things vary with the situation of the individual, but she gives you the scenarios that you can choose from. I think probably the most pressing thing at the moment is going to be the economy and loss of jobs, the devaluing of the U.S. dollar, the collapse of the global economy based on the U.S. dollar, perhaps alien presence toward the end of all this, at the end of this year, early next year, to solve the problems and appoint their man in charge of the planet. By the way, that reminds me, you know that Case Foundation that Papa Bear was talking about? During the break, I was looking at his website during the break, and this guy has set up on his website a number of PDFs going for a world peace treaty. And on his site he says, I'll quote this, the date of January 21st, 2013 for release of these documents is chosen for its importance, and now mankind has 60 days until the 21st of March 2013, just 7 days away, to set the scene to achieve what his forefathers could not do for thousands of years by signing himself into accepting peace in its true sense, individually and collectively. Now, how they've set a date, why they've set a date, I don't know. They're in Belgium at the moment and moving out of Belgium to a new location. But his whole thing is about world peace treaty, and this is the time for a peace treaty, isn't it?
Yeah. So I don't know. What do you think? He was sent out here?
I don't know. It's the kind of technology and stuff that certainly would be interesting to people, and he could be a mouthpiece for, the announcement of the presence, of the aliens, quote unquote.
Well,
anyway,
I do find it interesting. I was going to say, I do find it interesting when people come out with that kind of information, and they're not fearing for their lives. I mean, they're not usually coming out with something like that. I mean, I don't know how you feel about the old Fred Bell death, but I found that kind of suspicious, and there's been plenty like it. So I would think Fred Bell, his death. I found that kind of suspicious. Fred Bell was he was on Jesse Ventura's conspiracy theory.
Oh yes, yes, right.
And he had a heart attack right after he talked with death. Yeah. So with all that, I say when people come out with this kind of information, usually they're not around long.
No, they're not. But now this guy's not been around long as far as that. I mean, they've had their organization in Belgium for about a year or so, or I think what they've said here. But apparently, Belgium is now asking them to leave. Put pressure on them to get out of the country. So not wiping them out, but telling them to leave. Now, maybe the Belgian government knows a bit more than we do about it. So I can only tell you that they're not comfortable with them being in Belgium.
No. Okay. Well, one more thing I wanted to get into with you, Stan, and that's the paradigm change that we can expect. What should we expect here coming up? I mean, you probably feel like we're in them last days talked about in Revelations.
Well, gosh, paradigm change. Again, that's kind of relative to the individual, but I'd say that as a collective race here, we're about to enter into a period of time unlike any other we've experienced on the planet. It's a time of change, some for good, some for bad, and it's going to be catastrophic change. It's going to be very trying times for the next 7 to 10 years. And so people are going to have to kind of get used to things changing, like how much fresh water they've got, how much energy they can use, what kind of food they've got, if any, if they can get work. Will the money they get be enough to survive and pay the bills and eat? Are they going to be at risk of nuclear war? There will be some conflicts like that and terrorist attacks here in this country. There's just a number of things that will change the paradigm in a bad way. I think we're going to see a breakout of civil disobedience on so many fronts. I don't know what to call it, just a civil war. It's going to be civil disobedience. Muslim against Christian, Christian against Muslim, Hispanics against Anglos, whites against blacks. There are going to be so many fronts and facets to this civil disobedience when it happens that it's just going to be chaos here in the United States, and I think that day is fast approaching.
I agree. I think so too. And and of course, the mainstream media and the New World Order, they'd love to divide people with religion and race and things, and put us against each other. And I've been telling people too, being in the cities, in very populated cities, might not be the best place to be in the near future. I don't know. I had somebody come on the program and speak about Agenda 21 with me, and she swore up and down that she knew for a fact that they were starting a lot of these fires in the forest areas to draw people into the cities, to get them out of the outskirts, as part of their plan to have people easily rounded up in one area. I don't know.
Holly's been researching something here for several weeks now then on the change in population density in the United States, just the United States, where we get the stats for it, right? And he has found that about, I think it's 1/3 of the counties of the United States are in danger of shutting down because of the migration of the people into the cities. And I looked at her map she had there, and in the map shows people are coming out in the last 2 years, are coming out of the country areas into the cities in great numbers. That's Agenda 21 right there.
That is Agenda 21. Wow. I'll tell you, there's a lot happening, Stan. It is so hard to keep up with everything that's going on. This is the most active time I can remember in my life. And, I'm only 41, but wow. I've never seen so much stuff going on at one time. So we're definitely in for one hell of a ride.
It is that. And I'm sorry so many of our young people are so distracted with technology and gadgets and life and fun that they miss reading and understanding what's happening to them. It's almost like that movie V, where the young people are very tempted to follow the aliens because it's a new wonderful thing, and the old fuddy-duddies who are saying look out are wrong, but they're not.
Yeah.
Have you watched the V series, the movies from the 70s?
Yes, I did. I remember them well.
I've tried for years to contact the author of that. That's Ken Johnson. There's another book in the series, the fourth, which they haven't made a movie of yet. But in his as well, when the aliens have taken over the Earth, and some good, some bad, and they're starting towards the bad side again, there's another race of aliens with more power and supporting mankind to come and depose that. And what have I been talking to you about here today about, Satan being the false Messiah, his race, or his group of people being, false aliens. And there's one greater who comes, who is the righteous one with his power and his troops, and that's the second quote-unquote alien race, because they don't live around here, coming to rid us of the first kind that's been plaguing mankind. So Ken Johnson has worked so much of biblical prophecy and history into his work, secular work, that I'm just amazed. Even the blood of a hybrid human-alien baby is used to defeat the aliens or to keep them off of certain areas. This blood powder residue, and it's like the blood of Christ saves mankind, saves you from eternal death. And that similarity is in Johnson's work. It's just, my jaw dropped every time I started realizing that here's another central thing that Johnson talked about in his theme.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, I was just telling the listeners last night, a friend of mine, Peter Kling, had shared a movie trailer with me. It's called World War Z. And I checked out this movie trailer, this movie that's supposed to be coming out, I don't know when, any day now, I guess. And if it doesn't showcase what it's going to look like in the very near future, I don't know what does. There was people, it looked like ants running up mountains. It was just total chaos all over the world. And here in the United States, it's just all hell broke loose. And I suggest if anybody's curious of what it might look like, go check out that trailer for World War Z, it's called.
World War Z, is it?
Yeah,
well,
World War Z. Yeah, it's, in Hollywood, they love to showcase the future, it seems. And if that's the future, that's pretty scary. Because
very scary.
It really, yeah, it certainly is. Well, Stan, if there's anything that you'd like to get out there that we haven't discussed, anything you want to plug or what have you, by all means, please go ahead.
Michael, there's so much there that I don't know where to begin. I'm hoping that people will look at two very important survival books one that Holly's got called Dare to Prepare, which basically tells you how to prepare physically as best you can for a lot of the events that could potentially happen, and probably will happen, most of them, in some form or another. And then the spiritual preparation, which I wrote in The Cosmic Conspiracy. And my book started in 1978, first edition, and it's now 300 pages. It was 200 pages. And I last updated in 2010 with the last warning, explaining about this great deception about to happen and not to be fooled. So between that book, Holly's book, and my book, there's the spectrum of preparation. One says, my book says spiritually, you are going to die sometime. You may die before you thought you would in what's coming. So it's important to get your relationship with your life hereafter, straight with God. And that's what the book tells you, that in scientific terms, what's happening in the history of it and where we're headed. And then there's a page in there where you can sign your name and say, okay, I accept salvation through Jesus Christ. That's important. That's the first thing you do. Then you prepare to endure until he comes to collect you, if he's going to, take you out of here like he did with Noah, into a place of safety while the judgment's hit. And the practical preparation Holly has in that book, we have done it ourselves. There's virtually nothing in it that we haven't tested or had friends test to be sure that it would work and how it would work and, how necessary it was. So between the two, that's the importance of preparation. And if you just go to the standdeyo.com website, there's even a whole website full of free stuff to download to help you start preparing immediately. In addition, you can get the books, and that is the things that you take with you when there's no internet. And there's just so much information there that you have to have it in printed form. It's not safe to carry it on digital stuff that could be corrupted by EMPs and things like that. Now, Holly gets up 6 days a week, as I said at the beginning of the program, about 4:30 in the morning, sometimes earlier when she's got news on the mind. And she prepares our website with links to the important news stories, geophysics, political, religious, that kind of stuff. And she groups it so that you can have a quick read, headlines, and okay, I want to read that. You click a button, you go to it. But it helps people, saves them time. Early in the morning, they get up and they look at this. We watch them come in on our web stats. And they'll read it before they go to work, and read it at lunchtime, and they'll read it in the evening when they get home. Seeing what's going on around them, it keeps them in the loop as long as we can have internet access. So it's very important that people follow that up. Go to our website.
Absolutely, and that's key too. As long as we have the internet.
It is. I mean, that's I don't know how many days, weeks, or months we've got left in that, between the Chinese trying to take our system down and Obama trying to make a new internet under total control of the government and shutting it. And with people wanting to nuke us. I mean, with EMP stuff. I mean, I don't know how long the internet will be there. We expect any moment for it to just disappear, at least for the private citizen.
Yeah, well, I hope that doesn't happen. But they've certainly been trying to get control of the internet for quite a while now. And all it'll take is one false flag or another, and that's what'll happen. You wake up one day and you'll be stuck with just the fake news, if you're lucky.
If you're lucky, yeah, and martial law on top of that.
Yeah, that's something to think about, Stan, that's for sure. All I can say is people need to be prepared, and I strongly suggest they follow the information on your website. I certainly do. I have a friend, John Moore, who I know that he, on a regular basis, checks out information from your website, and you both do a fantastic job. And I want to thank you so much, Stan.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk to your audience there, Michael. I appreciate it. We're certainly doing our bit to help folks. Holly and I don't take vacations. It'd certainly be nice if we could, but there's just no time. Every day is just jam-packed. I think we spend between 90 and 100 hours a week doing some kind of work here on this, and it's got to be done. We're hoping enough people survive that we'll all get together and rebuild what's left.
Yeah, I hope you're right, Stan. And God bless you, my friend, and thank you so much for being a guest tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Bye-bye now.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, everybody, that's Stan Deyo. Welcome back to Late Night in the Midlands. Stan Deyo, welcome back, my friend.
Good to be here, Michael. How's things in your part of the world?
You. Well, so far so good. It's hot one day and cold the next, but I think a lot of the country is experiencing that, huh?
Hey, and sinkholes and flooding and earthquakes and volcanoes elsewhere. Yes.
Yeah,
hey, did you see
absolutely.
Did you see that one about the golfer that the sinkhole opened underneath him, swallowed him up?
Yes, and how about
Yeah, we
the
got
guy
that on
in
the
Florida?
website. Yeah. I was telling Holly, she put it up, and I had to look at that, and I thought, gee whiz, that's kind of neat. We could say, instead of making a hole in one, it was one in a hole.
Oh, that's bad. It's funny, but it's bad. I mean, could you imagine?
I know.
You're standing there getting ready to, hit the ball down the grass, and all of a sudden the earth opens up. And there's a lot of this going on now.
Oh, I know. All over the place.
So,
China
yeah,
as well as here.
Yeah, absolutely. In Louisiana, it's a big sinkhole there too. So what's going on, Stan? I mean, you seem to have a pretty good handle on a lot of this stuff, and with the increase in earthquakes and so on. I guess we could start there if you want. With the earthquakes, you do pretty good at, I don't want to call it predicting, but predicting where the next big ones might show up. How do you do it?
Well, I developed a technique that I guess it was 1995 when I started playing with some data from the U.S. Navy. And at the time, the Navy at California at Monterey were putting up twice a day maps of the oceans of the world with the data they were collecting from their submarines and from buoys and ships and from some satellites. Now, the data they put up was showing the sea surface temperature all over the planet. It also showed the deviation from the normal of the sea surface temperatures all over the planet. Now, if you look at, temperatures of the sea, normally there's this big red swath of hotter at the equator and cooler toward the polar regions, big deal. But I looked at what's called their anomaly map, the difference in today's sea surface temperature as compared to, say, an average of 30 days or a year before. They use different averages, but still, it shows you how unusual the ocean temperature is in certain places, everywhere actually, according to the average temperature. Well, it made pretty pictures. It had little, globs of color here and globs of color there, and and blues and reds. And I thought, well, this is interesting. And I was playing around with it one day, and I had a couple of days maps of this sea surface temperature in front of me, and I was using Photoshop, and I put the two images together, and I subtracted them, I added them, I multiplied them, and see if it made neat patterns, just killing time. And well, gosh, that was interesting. I thought I looked at around the California coastline there, and in the images that I was playing with the day before, I'd seen some kind of on their maps it was yellow and green, a yellow and green thing like a butterfly right on the coast of the United States there, where an earthquake had happened the day I was looking at it. I thought, well, I wonder. I mean, I don't know why, but maybe there's a change in sea surface temperature or something, and that'll be a precursor for earthquakes. Well, I started developing the technique, and it took me a while to work out the kinks in it, but I also found out that the Navy not only was taking data from temperature changes, but they were accidentally or otherwise putting in electrical field data from their satellites showing changes in electricity in the atmosphere above fault lines. Not that they intended to do it, I think it was just a byproduct of the way they did the maps. Well, okay, so I figured out that, make it a long story a little bit shorter, that the change in temperature on one side of a fault line versus the one on the other side of the fault line, the temperatures on either side of the fault line, when those became at opposites, like one got colder, one got hotter on that map, that it formed kind of like a little rough butterfly wing, left wing being yellow, right wing being green, and it was, one temperature and charge going up and the other one going down. And electricity was taking the heat from one side of the fault line up in through the air just above the sea surface and going into the other side of the fault line and delivering heat to that side. So one side was getting cold, the other side was getting warm. This is something that happens in electrical theory, Thomson effect and Peltier effect. The electricity actually sucks heat out of one side of the conductor and puts it over to the other one, especially in dissimilar joints. Now, around the coastal areas, the coastlines of all the continents, there are huge formations of crystallized rock from ages ago. And when you fracture some of these with the pressure, you start to press on them to break them apart. It's like taking one of those wintergreen lifesavers in the dark and hit it with a hammer. You see flashes of light from the electricity produced by breaking the crystals in the wintergreen lifesaver. This is the same thing that happens, called piezoelectricity. And piezoelectricity. And when these fault lines get under pressure and about to erupt, it might take 1 to 10 days sometimes before the eruption or the earthquake finally takes place. And of course, the bigger it is, I found out, the earlier we get a signal, because it starts to build like that over 2 or 3 days, and I say, well, something's going to happen there. And that's basically the concept I used up until 2006 when the Navy stopped supplying the maps, well, at least to the public. They got new satellites and new programs and discontinued it. Now, I did visit the Navy with Holly at Monterey early in the game, and they told me I would have about a 30% error in my calculations because they had about a 30% error in theirs from cloud cover and faulty buoys and submarine data that was missed and that kind of stuff. Therefore, they said, we can't endorse you publicly because of this because of this error in the heat maps, but we will look at your site every day. Interesting theory. Now, when they stopped producing the maps that I was using, about a year or so later, I was reading a technical paper and found out that the U.S. Navy, among other scientific groups, had suddenly decided to start looking at the electrical methods of forecasting earthquakes by studying the electric components over the fault line, exactly what I've been doing for, 10 or 11 years before that. It was flattering in that respect, and I guess about a year before I lost their data, I was contacted by the entire Admiralty in a phone call, a conference phone call, the entire Admiralty of Mexico, and they wanted to know how to do these maps because they wanted to be able to predict, tsunamis and earthquakes along the western Mexican coast, which I explained to them and told them where to get the information from the Navy and whatever, and also had a phone call from the Association of the 50 island nation states around the world, because they really have to worry about tsunamis and sea level rise and things like that. And these people were all using the service, and then, of course, we lost the data. And it wasn't until this year that I figured out how to get data from other types of data streams that weren't classified or weren't Navy and that kind of stuff, put them together. It takes a little bit longer, about 3 times as long, but I put them together and was able to then forecast earthquakes. This time, the data is so accurate, I was absolutely stunned. I hit 90% of the earthquakes that do occur with this,
amazing.
And that's how I do it.
That's amazing. Now, what about inland? Is there a way to do this inland, or does this only work on the coast?
I can't do it. I need a big computer to do that, and access to the infrared high detail, and these are classified, but over land masses, the heat signature of the land. You have to have a supercomputer or one that's really pretty powerful to separate the heat signatures and changes, heat and cold, of mankind's activities on the landmass from those that are geo-produced temperature differentials and charge differentials. I'm sure we could do it. The same thing applies. But, I suppose if we could get the government to put sensors, charge sensors along known fault lines, major fault lines like Madrid and stuff, that we could get the warning ahead by doing that, and they may be doing that now. Okay, there are a lot of sensors around the New Madrid area. I see them on the maps here, a lot of sensors that may also be measuring the electric component, which does give us a sneaky clue that something's about to happen. I can't do it, but the government can.
Is this kind of like, now I've heard with big earthquakes like what Japan had with Fukushima, people reported seeing circles in the sky. I don't know if they were cloud circles or energy circles of some sort. Is that would that cause something like that?
I hadn't heard circles before. I've heard balls of light popping up out of the ground.
Okay, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, and I think that's what we would normally call ball lightning or ionized gas bubbles. And these are likely to occur where you have this tremendous pressure undersea there or along the coastline producing electric charge, which is released, but sometimes it can be released in a manner that's similar to when severe lightning strikes and it can't find a place to unload all of its charge in that lightning bolt, and it hits like a roadblock on the Earth, and bang, it bounces up and forms a spinning sphere of charged particles. I think it's something similar to that that's caused by the mechanical action as well as the electric action of a fault line. There are definitely changes that occur in the sky, and in animal behavior just before a major quake. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I always tell people, if you see the animals acting funny, then, something, there's your sensors right there.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
What are some of the key fault lines of concern right now? I mean, do you expect any major activity in any of them anytime soon?
Yes. Every day Holly puts up the maps after I figure them out on the website. Currently, in the last month, when I say current, in the last month, a little bit over a month, probably 6 weeks, I've been seeing a lot of Richter 5 plus, up into the 7s earthquakes on the left side of the Ring of Fire in the Pacific. And that's the fault line that runs from Kamchatka Island in Russia down through Japan and down into the Philippines and down through New Guinea and over into New Zealand through a zigzag kind of path. That's the left side of the Ring of Fire around the Pacific. Now, there's been like 4-to-1, 4 times as many of these larger earthquakes occurring there than normal when compared to the major earthquakes over in the west coast of South America and the United States and Central America. Some of these quakes on the west side that have been increasing in number and magnitude drifted all the way around into the islands of Indonesia on the west side, close to, what are we looking at, Sumatra and Singapore. I'm just looking at my map here, where we've had, again, an increase of these larger quakes. And there, by the way, I'll get back to this in a minute, but there's something happening in the North Indian Ocean, has been for the last 8 days, which is really, really unusual. We'll get to that in a second. Now, back over on the eastern side of the Pacific Ring of Fire, we're now starting to see pressure zones build up for earthquakes and volcanoes. They both get the same kind of signature, more than we have ever seen or I've ever seen before in the 17 years that I've been doing this. There are 4 actual zones from the southern part of Mexico all the way down to Ecuador. And on their coastlines, we're getting consistent thermal and electrical anomalies there that do not go away. Normally these would happen, and about a day to 4 days later you get an earthquake, big deal, okay, it was an earthquake there. But these are hanging on, and this is not good. Now, I did read recently that there is a considerable opinion saying that there's going to be a new plate breaking loose, a tectonic plate, in northwest Africa there, in that area where I'm seeing all this activity, and that might be the reason we're seeing these thermal and electrical signals, is that plate is about to fracture. Now, if you go up the coastline from there to the Baja and up near the Salton Sea in Southern California, and up into Oregon and into Washington State, where they have the Juan de Fuca plate, that area is also starting to see some activity, but not enough to panic yet. And the Baja thing down in California, not enough to panic yet. I am expecting to see